and welcome along. So the structure of this session on future work is I'm the futurist Dave Wild, and I'll present to you for about 30 to 40 minutes. We'll interact during that time, so we'll be using the chat to interact, but we've allowed an hour. So that kind of means that at the end of things, there's maybe 15 minutes. If you want to stay on, and you can be cameras on, microphones on, whatever you'd like to do, just from a coaching perspective in terms of anything that I cover here today. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to step forward into that future. And the focus today is all on future work from a visionary leadership perspective. Brilliant. So Kenton's visioning, working with amazing clients who are excited about possibilities. Okay, I better step up the level of excitement to make that future happen. Now, I'm going to give you a sense of the underlying structure behind the scenes. So the beauty of this type of event is I can pause and chat about what I'm doing. So if I'm giving a futurist keynote, I don't explain to people the inner workings that are going on behind the scenes. But we are all futurists. And I'd like to prove that to you. Have you ever thought about the future? Have you ever wondered the future? Have you ever actively created your own future? That makes you a futurist. So how do you focus that energy? Well, as a futurist, I've learned that in order to create the future, there's three critical areas of focus. The first is on speaking. So you've got to take the ideas that are in your mind and convey them to other people. And as Kenton's just highlighted, you have to convey them in a way that gets people excited about those possibilities. Now, it's not enough just to talk about the future, and that's the real danger at the moment. There's lots of post-it notes, lots of ideas about what the future could be, and then we carry on with the status quo. So hiding behind me is this word facilitate. So you take it from speaking about the future to actively facilitating the conversation and the work between people. Particularly when you're working in complex spaces, you cannot do it alone. You have to facilitate that process. However, I've learned as a facilitator, there's lots of subtle things that I'm doing that are actually coachable skills. And so a big part of future work is coaching people in the skills that we're using. Now, we've already done that already. I'll give you an example. Do you notice how this session began at 11 o'clock? But it didn't begin at 11 o'clock. Can I just ask anyone, I don't know if I've got the right group of people here, but has anyone ever been in a meeting that didn't start on time? If I could just validate in the chat whether anyone's got that experience. Always, often, look, excellent, brilliant. So I used to be in that situation as a facilitator because you're trying to pack a lot in without a short amount of time, but not everyone turns up on time. And often it's the leader or the chair or a key person who needs to be there. So if you design your meeting to begin with something critical, like here are the objectives today, or here is the opening presentation from the CEO, you can't do anything but wait. Alternatively, what you can do is fill the space with small talk, but there's a space in between where you can say, what are we here to do? What are we working on? In this case, it's around visionary leadership. So how can I make use of that first block of time to actually start to move us forward? Now, I was talking about the future of work, but what I've learned is people think about the future of work like it's off in the distance, but it's not. The future is here, and it's not just 2020 that it arrived in a rush. It's been around us for a long time. So as a futurist, I find it far more useful to talk about the present of work. So these are skills for the workplace of today. Now, it's not just futurists who have to speak, facilitate, and coach. That's what you're all constantly doing, moving people between these different phases and ways of working. But what you might not know is about the intersections between these. So if I take that thing of if you're going to speak to someone and present an idea to them, you want to move them forward. You want to shift them as a result of that idea. So even just me thinking about, well, am I going to stand here? Or can I get some more impact and go, we really need to shift things by coming in closer to camera? Now, this isn't about webcams or online meetings. It's something physically when you're meeting. Do you tell people about your ideas just sitting down? Or at a dramatic point, do you actually stand up and wander to a different point? So physically, that's how you start to shift people forward. As I've mentioned, as you facilitate people, there's skills to actually move them forward around that. So that's where the role of coaching comes in, to actually go, hey, it's not a one-off experience, it's a learnable way of working. And we found it really fascinating, the energy change that you have between being a presenter and being a coach. So I'm sort of in a presentation mode at the moment. It's why I've got a screen behind me. It's why I'm high energy, caught up in the ideas and going on inspired by it. But when you coach, you actually start to sit down and you lower that energy. So at a certain point though, it can become too low with the team. And so you cycle back up to inspiring people. And that becomes that way of working. And that's what we're going to be doing here today. And ultimately that enables you to shift and create that future. So I thought we'd actually do that now, and I'd set myself a bit of a challenge because I reckon I can do all three of those modes within 3 minutes. So we're going to do an experience now. And have you ever wondered what your future holds? Well, if you wonder about what the future holds, and you might even be here to go, how do I find that out? Key to doing that is to notice the future around you. And we're going to do that now. So I want you to have a look at this everyday scene. Imagine you're actually in this cafe. You just glance over and you observe this. Now, what do you notice? Can I get people to pop this into the chat? Just giving this a cursory glance, what do you notice? By the way, this is my favorite facilitation technique called silence. I'm not that good at it. Great, he's drinking tea. Now, I'd like you to look even closer. He's by himself. You're now working as a futurist. So you're observing the scene, but now from a futurist perspective. You're trying to see into the future. Because we often think that the future is off in the distance, but it's not. It's all around us. We're all operating in different time zones. If I get you to start to look from a technology perspective, what do you notice? He's toggled to his laptop. Nice. Now notice how the largest objects draw our attention, the things we're expecting to see. What I've been looking for over the past minute is the subtle little detail. What do you notice going on with his head? And I love this where it's sorry on a call, because I think that means you're on a call, but what you might be suggesting is that he's on a call because he's got AirPods in. Now, do you see how we notice those details? Now, we might just look at that and go, oh, he's just listening to music. But is he? Because to Ian's point, is he actually on a call? And then we might go, oh yeah, he's talking to someone because that's what I do. But is he? Or is he actually talking to a machine? Because typing is becoming of the past as we start to get invisible conversational interfaces. Now, can you see that visioning isn't creating your vision out of nothing? Because vision means to see. So a critical element of visioning is to notice that world around you. Because just talking about invisible interfaces and conversational interfaces, whatever you're working on, you can then go, well, how does that impact on my world? How might that work? So I'll give you an idea, and this isn't pre-planned, but I've just realized I'm like living in the past because I've got the chat on screen. But maybe I could have the chat audibly talking back to me, right? So I could actually use, and it doesn't even have to be that smart an AI, to just be able to speak it out to me loud. Now that visioning came out of noticing the details all around us. So this is this focus on futurity skill, and it's one of a set of 8, the ability to be visionary, to notice the future around you. Sorry, I made 5 progress than I thought. That's 15 minutes. The presentation is completed. So we'll just move now to coaching. No, that's not true. But it shows how you don't have to take a long time to learn a new skill. So when you end this webinar, do not go back today to exactly the same habits. Wherever you are, notice the future more carefully around you. Challenge yourself to see something that you hadn't noticed. Now, the structure of what we're going to be looking at today is the ability to see that future requires mind flexing. So we're going to look at what's the importance of mind flexing. Then if I manage to convince you about why mind flexing is important, we're going to quickly touch on 4 different mind flexes. But one of those builds into the future ready skills, so we're going to spend some time working on how to actually vision. And then at the end, we'll share a toolkit with you, and as I mentioned, happy to have a conversation, take questions and answers around things. So stepping forward into that future, as I mentioned, the question is, why mind flex? And actually, what is mind flexing? Well, if we think about the modern leadership environment that you're operating in now, there are volatile conditions, and I'm not just talking about the shifts and changes over the past year. Things have always been unpredictable and volatile. The pace is getting faster. Now, you have to be careful because from a futurist perspective, I know that every generation says that the world has never been as fast as it is now. Think back through time. I might have been going, we've now got steam engines and we travel so fast with these iron horses. Or I used to have to wait for a carrier pigeon and now I've got a fax machine. The world has never been so fast. But the reality is, it is quicker and quicker. So you're now in this presentation with 0 physical travel time. That's because of technology shifts. And most teams miss the fact that technology doesn't mean, for example, just digital and robotics. A piece of paper is a piece of technology. So our technology constantly shifts around us. Moving from typing to voice is a shift in technology. And what this higher level of connectivity has meant is that as a leader, the social pressures are greater than ever. Because it maybe used to be far easier to be in your echo bubble and not know about the impact of the decisions you were making, but now we know. So what that means from a futurist perspective is that too many people have been trained to look for best practice, what works the most. I'm trying to get the highest, whatever that measure is. And that is important. But that's where history repeats, because this is what is proven to work. But where does the future begin? The future actually begins on the edges. So you actually have to lead 2 businesses, 2 teams, whatever it is you're working on. One where what's proven to work, and at the same time with this ability to mind flex, also go, what might work? Now, if we bring it down to a personal level and think about from a neuroscience perspective, what's going on? You're constantly having ideas fire in your mind, and they're traveling across well-worn pathways. So these synaptic connections. So even now, as I'm presenting to you, you're going, oh yes, I agree with that. Yes, I know that. Yes. And what it's doing is it's traveling over these connections. But mind flexing is saying, how do I push my mind out into this territory here? And this happens both at a personal level within your head, but it also happens from a team level. This is why diversity and inclusion are so important. It is to spark your mind into new territories. So the thing about mind flexing is you don't just think with your own thoughts, you use all of those ideas around you. So can you see, for example, that serendipity of them going, sorry, on a call sparked a new possibility for what was happening in that scene. This is one of the things that we've loved about online meetings, the ability to capture chat. So people's handwriting is far better than on post-it notes, but everyone can visibly see it at the same time. So if you're not already doing this, think about doing mixed modes in meetings. So you can use the chat application when you're meeting face-to-face. So that ability, or if it's a blended meeting, so often you have the people who are online and the other people haven't got online, but they could. They could be looking at a conference call, but joining on an individual device to take part in that chat. So this mind flexing is all about how we shift mindsets. And fundamentally, it's about going from a fixed mindset to a growth mind flex. Now, what that means is it starts to have a shift in attitude. Instead of it being people versus technology, it's about people with technology. So when I talked about diversity and inclusion before, a lot of people sort of do that separate from technology. And it's almost to some extent anti-it. We need to digitally detox. We need to get away from our devices. We need to connect at a human level. All those things are true. However, the internet and technology is built to connect people. So you can also use those things to create a greater level of connection. So for example, if I'm speaking at a conference and people are submitting their questions on an app and they're coming up on the big screen, I won't just be a slave to the technology. That's people versus technology. I will use the technology to see a great question, and then we'll go, hey, Shirley in the audience somewhere. I'd love to run a mic to you and get you to engage. Now it's people with technology. This is about a fundamental shift from teams demanding certainty from their leaders to the leaders recognizing I cannot provide certainty. So it's not a case of wait until I can provide you with certainty. Instead, it's about guiding through that uncertainty, making people comfortable with the shifts that are going on around them. There's another fascinating thing where in the past it's been about deciding by experience, and experience is critically important, but experience is also another word for bias. So recognizing the need to let go of our experience at times, strong ideas lightly held, that then enables you to explore by collaborating. So if I was asking for questions in the chat, but dismissing each of them going, no, that's not what I'm looking for, that's not what I'm looking for, I'm stuck in that fixed mindset of the past where I'm deciding by experience. So it's not about dictating the correct rules. It's about using diverse perspectives to reinvent how things work. Ultimately, it creates a shift from a need to protect the status quo to creating the future. Now that was a lot of words. So I now want to use the principle, the visionary principle, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I'm now going to share with you 2,000 words because I'm going to use 2 images to convey that same change. Behind the scenes, I want you to think of those 3 circles I showed, so that Venn diagram of shifting between speaking mode and inspiring people forward. Because so many people cling to the status quo because they fear change, because this is what the future feels like to them. And it's being presented like this to them. Robotics, AI, technology. Now layer on top of that, biological threats, pandemics. No wonder people go, I want to go back to the way that we were working. But when everything is thrown up and it's unpredictable, you can either choose to view the future like this, or you can mind flex and shift your perspective and view that same change like this. It creates new possibilities, new ways of working for all of us. So fundamentally, the problem is with the word mindset. Often in times of extreme change, people go, we need to learn a new mindset. But when I looked at that as a futurist, that's actually the problem. The word set, because set means fixed in a specified place or position. You've probably found it at times. If I've been standing here, you've gone, Dave, I can't quite read the type, even though I know what it says. I just please move. If I'm set, I'm going, nah, can't. But if I go, yeah, sure, I can flex out of the way. So that's why it's about developing a mind flex. The ability to bend, move, or stretch in order to exercise, and not just physically, it's with your mind. One of the key things about flexing is it's not a sign of weakness. If you think about trees, if you think about buildings and earthquakes, if you think about yoga, there are so many examples where we know we need to have the ability to flex. That's why I talked about strong ideas lightly held. I don't know whether you can tell, but I'm quite passionate and believe ideas quite strongly. But I'm 51 years old, and it took me at least 4 decades, maybe getting closer to 5, to realize, oh, just because I think something, it doesn't make it so. And I can just park that explore a new perspective, and then choose not to return to it, or I can quite happily return to it. But that ability to flex and shift. Now, it's not just about bend your mind in any direction. There's actually 4 key mind flexes. And if you remember one word, it's this word leap, because this is the way to remember how to mind flex. So just to make sure you all take away one key learning, can I get people to type into the chat the word leap? Right, and Andrew, if you just get ready to knock anyone out of the call who refuses to follow my instruction. Now, do you notice how I used a mindset there? I said, here is the rule, here's what I'd like you to do, and you all obediently did it, and that was brilliant, because I actually am trying to program that in your mind. But now feel free to flex, and you can type any other word in there, or you can play with the letters, or you can play with that concept. But it's just to say, in terms of bringing all of this together, excellent. Okay, if you could just get Ian out of this meeting, Andrew, and we'll carry on. But see, that's brilliant. See what happens to creativity and energy. So when it was rote learning and we're all doing just what I was saying, great, that's excellent. You're learning some stuff, but it's not lifting the team. It's not sparking new possibilities. So the whole thing of running conversations alongside to spark and lift. And what I was doing there was actually shifting between some of these Mindflex modes. So they work on 2 key axes. The first one is to see the future as progressive thinking, looking forward, and that's what we were doing earlier on. It's a real focus for today around this visionary leadership. But can you see how I'm also standing on the shoulders of giants? So leveraging ideas around me. And at a larger scale, when we're doing strategy facilitation work, we will actually bring in the next generation and collide them with leaders of today to enable us to see forward into the future, but by leveraging ideas around us. So that's one axis, and I find it useful as a futurist. You think of it like physically, I'm trying to progressively see further forward. And then I'm going, hang on, I need to walk into the future backwards because I need to learn from the past. So I'm looking and digging for ideas. So for example, when Zoom took off, really quickly, I went, great, who's the founder of Zoom? How did he begin? What's he doing differently to other people? And I was able to stand on the shoulders of Eric Yarn to get insights around how things are working. The second axis is this vertical axis. So right now, I hope you're all just kind of half paying attention, letting your mind wander and drift, because creating the future, changing the system, innovating, requires letting your mind wander expansively up to the impossible. There are plenty of people, as we all know, who really quickly will tell you, well, that's not possible. But you need to stay in that space. The risk then, though, is that too many people stay there. And as I mentioned before, this is where you get post-it notes and reports and all sorts of possibilities, but the status quo remains largely intact. So it's actually then about taking the impossible and making it possible. And that's how you achieve impact. So I'll give you an example. That thing of putting a white dot and getting you to vision forward. You saw how that actually connected with people. Think about the next meeting you're in. You could draw a circle and ask someone, what do they see? Do you notice how your brain's probably going, that feels a bit random and a bit weird, and I don't think I would do that. That's trying to take the impossible and make it possible to move forward. Think of that Venn diagram, those 3 circles, you're actively moving between them. You're not just staying in a speaking mode, you're facilitating and you're coaching. That's how you keep moving people forward. So this thing about moving forward into the future, recognize this shape. So I'm now asking you to remember a word leap, and you can see the word leap here, but also to remember a movement. Because this is the key to mind flexing, to move your way forward, to shift between those different modes. It's not about, first of all, I'm progressive, then I leverage, then I move to expansive, then I do active. You are constantly cycling between those. But I can show you a moment in life that this connects with. Has this ever felt like your life? Maybe a year past, maybe this year, maybe it always feels like this. You imagine traveling down this river without a paddle. That's the equivalent of just waiting for the world to change. But also if you just paddle blindly, never watching the currents. So it's the ability to go, actually, I've got to go hard at this point, or I need a bit of space and time. I need to pull over to the side, watch a webinar, learn something, and then paddle back in again. So moving between those modes, think of it just as you physically paddle your way forward. That is what you do when you're mind flexing. And I facilitate a lot of different teams. So whether it's working with a startup in terms of their strategy to get market traction, or whether it's a systems level with intergovernment agencies, you can see the people who have the ability to flex, to take new ideas, to be open to possibilities, and you can see the people who just want to carry on in a particular direction. And it's kind of like last year, even though we needed to flex, it was sort of okay to go, we've just got to get through, right? So to some extent, people did what they knew how to do. But we need to shift and change and rebuild. So that ability to mind flex is going to be so important. Now, it's not enough just to think differently, because thoughts alone do not shift the world. They do not create your future. So this mind flexing builds out to a set of 8 future-ready skills. And you can see how each of them pushes out in a different direction. So progressive mind flex enables you to be more visionary and to be more strategic. Strategy means a plan of action to achieve major aims. So can you actually see what your aims are before you move to action? As I mentioned before, a leveraged mind flex enables you to be more inclusive, but also to be more digital. So in a meeting, to be able to actually, rather than ask people in the room, that's a bit of factual information, maybe I'll ask a device, right? Oh, maybe I'll actually use Teams or whatever network I'm using to connect out and do a live question. So these are strongly connected. Then expansive thinking is about creative thinking, which enables you to innovate, but not doing it alone, and collaborating. And collaboration is not a synonym for teamwork. If you think about in the times of war, a collaborateur worked with the enemy. So collaboration is about working with people you normally wouldn't. And then an active mind flex is recognizing that, oh, we all have brilliant plans, but the world is incredibly complex. So when we start to make those plans real, we have to have the ability to adapt in order to have an impact. So for the second half, I'd really like to focus in now around this focus on looking at being visionary and looking forward. So we're about to do a bit of work. So I'm kind of starting to shift from this kind of speaking mode, a little bit of facilitation through the chat. I'm now going to personally coach you forward and through a way of working. Vision is really, really critical. Vision statements that are generic, we will be the world's #1 through happy staff, customers and shareholders, they're not important. But visions that inspire, that say we see a world where what will be happening is this, by doing this, gives people clarity. So it's about exploring the possibilities like any journey. Like, have you ever been on a holiday where people want to go in different directions? It's not very successful until you go, right, this is where we're heading. Now, how do we get there? When exploring the concept of visioning, it's really important to touch on other concepts like purpose and mission, because what I find is all too often they get used interchangeably. Or people go, oh, those are kind of corporate concepts, they don't really matter. They absolutely do matter. You need to have vision to know where you're heading. You need to have a sense of purpose to have the drive to get there. And that's what purpose is. Why does this actually matter? And there's a subtle difference between purpose and mission. You don't necessarily need both statements, but you need one of them. So mission is what you're on to achieve that vision, driven by that sense of purpose. Just want to check, if you were driving in these kinds of conditions, now I don't mean when it's just raining a bit, I mean when all of a sudden the rain's come out of nowhere and you know you shouldn't be driving. Think about a moment in time when you've experienced that. My key question for you is, in those kind of times, did you go faster or slower in these kinds of conditions? Cool. Hopefully by now you've all programmed a bot just to automatically respond to me if I ask a question. Now let's just do a little bit of mind flexing, because I agree with you. Slower, slow. Kenton, love it. I put my lights on and keep a bigger gap, but maybe I'm traveling at the same speed. Because I haven't given you a context. If you're in a race and this was the conditions, right? So the ability to be visionary and to mind flex like a futurist is the difference between driving in these kind of conditions where you've got a fixed mindset or driving in these kind of conditions. You can't clear the windscreen perfectly because no one can say this is exactly what the future holds, but you can go, they're slowing down, maybe we should increase that gap. Have you considered this road off to the side that we've never explored? So being visionary is about seeing these signals. So this was the equivalent of before. Did you notice the earbuds? And if we thought about our interface, because we're really talking about developing an app, but actually shouldn't it be a conversational interface that is interfacing into an existing voice dictation system that's then locked into an ordering system, changing the fundamental flow of the way things work. So we're going to do a bit of visioning. And at the beginning of the session, I said to you, just vision, there's a white circle. Now I'm going to coach you through 4 stages of visioning. I'd like you to think of a project you're currently working on, or an area of the organization, or something that's important to you. It'll be useful to be able to share it in the chat. So it's something that you're sort of happy to put some thoughts around, because it's great to see what other people are doing. Now, the first step to visioning that a lot of people miss is you've got to focus on a specific goal. And we noticed this particularly last year. You try and work with someone to solve something and they go, yeah, but I've got this as well. And then, there's that problem and there's that problem. No wonder they couldn't vision their way forward. Brilliant, thanks, Ian. So if other people could do the same sort of thing there, think of a goal and then just pop it into the chat. And on one level, you're doing it to be collaborative and share with other people. But to be honest, the most useful thing it's focusing your own mind. Because if you don't write it down, if you don't type it in, then it's easy to vary from it. Great, these are brilliant goals. So keep these goals in mind. Now we're going to do step number 2. And step number 2 involves choosing a point in time. Now, a lot of people kind of go, yeah, goals should be specific and measurable and time-bound, but then they don't. So when I'm asked to facilitate strategic planning, I often have to ask the team, how far forward are we planning for? And everyone looks at each other and goes, I think it's 1, 2 years. I think it's 10 years. I think it's 5 years. So for this vision, could you pick a specific point in time? Just again, share that with yourself into the chat. So point in time. If I can see a couple of examples coming through, I'll give you a little bit of coaching around putting times in. Which probably wasn't a good comment to make because now people might go, well, I'm not going to put something in the chat because I don't want to be told what to do with it. So Ian, I love this. The sooner the better. And we all do that. But can you see how impossible it is? Because are we talking in 1 minute's time? Because then my vision would involve drop out of this webinar and do whatever you're doing. And then you kind of go, but I couldn't achieve it within that time. So the time sets to scale to things. So Ian, can I get you to put another note in there and put it in about when a particular point in time might be? Kenton, that's a great example, right? So other people might not be sure about when that is, or does takeover involve the day they start or the process of handover? So the more specific you get with it, the better it is. Brilliant. Then the next stage, and this is one that I don't hear other people talk about. Select a physical location. Think about this. We are visioning. Vision means to see. Think of it like an artist if they're painting a landscape, because that is visioning that scene. They can't do their painting without saying, what is the perspective? What is the angle I'm seeing it from? So can I get you to pick a physical location that you are now visioning this? So if I take that example of a management structure, right, starts to go, where am I physically looking at that from? Am I looking at it on a chart, on a bit of paper? because that's kind of the obvious thing. But immediately that enables me to go, it doesn't feel very visionary or inspiring. So am I visioning it from inside a meeting room with that team? That then enables me to go, oh, but my thinking then is that all those people need to be physically located together, and maybe they're not. So then I might go, okay, I'm visioning myself sitting at my computer, looking at my Zoom screen. Then I might go, actually, no, that's not the structure I want. I want a structure where people are out with customers more. So now I'm actually visioning from a particular customer's location. So have a think and pop into the chat. It's just a physical location, because we're about to do the final step, step number 4. Ah, awesome, great. See, Joel's been hard at work. He's been pre-preparing all of his answers and he's gone through and done all of them, but it's brilliant. Friday's team day in Onihunga. Now, here's the thing about that. I've actually been to Onihunga before, and it's quite a large place. Am I visioning from pulling up? Am I visioning from being inside? Am I visioning, if I'm inside, from on stage or alongside the team? Or am I visioning a conversation afterwards? And see how all of a sudden I start to get inspired with, hang on, if I'm visioning a conversation, maybe in the car park afterwards with someone, what are we talking about what that sprint has been like, and what are they saying? Are they saying it was really different because, and now I have to imagine what was different. This is great. So see how you're getting quite specific. Great, and the thing of all of those, and then I love how you've given it specific, because the problem with all those situations, that's where people end up with grey amorphous visions about being number one with no specificity, because they're trying to visualize everything. It's like a painter going, I'm going to paint everything and use every color, and they get muddy, grey, brown. So the specificity then enables you to look forward and to actually create that future. Can you see how hard it is? So for a lot of people, it can feel like this. And the mere act of coming along here makes you biased. You are more visionary than other people because you have a natural interest. I can see you're engaging in there, but others around you don't think in the same way. So the challenge in the future of work, and remember the future of work is here today, is how do we shift other people from saying that? That's why they don't want to step forward. It's why they don't want to follow you. So it's needing to give them the ability to unlock their thinking, to shift forward, to be able to see the world from a new and different perspective. To kind of go, I don't have to be constrained to be in a physical room. Now that shift comes through what we call work dreaming. This is kind of a behind the scenes world, because if you sort of say to people, I'm going to go and talk to you about work dreaming, a lot of people go, hang on, we don't need this dreaming at work. But think about the people who change the world. They are the people who dream. It's that moment of space, that moment of time. So it's building it into your routine. Now you might go, I have no time in my day for dreaming. My team has no time, but you do. Because if you're in a room for an hour, you can say to people, okay, for the first 10 minutes, I'd like you to pair up with someone you don't normally work with and go for a walking meet. And here's the question I'd like you to think about. And then from there, you can build forward as you get confidence and can be more radical. And you can go, I'd like you to walk for 20 minutes, but also stop and ask someone different to yourselves this question. Because vision doesn't happen in isolation. It is building those parts of the picture together. We've covered a lot of ground in a short space of time. I'd like you to think about just one thing. If you were to take just one thing away from this, it might be a technique, it might be a thought or idea that you had, or it might be something in the chat. I'll just get you to pause for a moment, reflect, and then share with others in the chat key learning or thought or insight. Experience is also bias. And I'm going to give you a name. And Andrea, maybe you might like to throw this into the chat. Actually, I'll give you a name here. this is the beauty of sharing. This name here, Vinod Khoshla, and I might even do his first name with the V in the front of it as well. He's the person who first said that. So he founded Sun Microsystems, and it was an interview, and just in passing, he said, in my experience, and then he said, by the way, experience is another word for bias. Mindflex is like a gym for your brain. So hopefully your mind's had a bit of a workout this morning, not too much of a workout. Visualization of the future you want. Walk into the future backwards. Now, again, Kenton, I'll just share with you here, because this is wisdom from our country. So ka mura ka muri. It's a Maori saying, to walk forwards, walk backwards into the future. Standing on the shoulders of giants. From strategy facilitation perspective, what I've learned with that saying is I run sessions fundamentally differently. So I used to rush into sessions and go, right, we need to create the future, we need to innovate, what do we do differently? And have you ever felt like this? Teams go, hang on, we've been working so hard. We need to pause. So I now begin sessions to go, let's all identify a milestone, something we're proud of. Let's share that, let's put that out there. Then let's build forward from that. And leap inside the infinity loop. Yeah, Joel, that thing of actually, it is an infinity loop. One of the things that Andrew and I talk about is that strategy and development and innovation is kind of like breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. So often we approach it like there's a solution and then it will be solved. But there are constantly new things to be solved. So being comfortable with that constant motion, and that's where I find the thing useful to say, hey, at times we'll paddle off to the side into quieter water around things. So in terms of you've shared with us, so just to share back with you, in terms of the work that we've done here today, to help you apply that, can share with you a future map. And this is about taking it from that visionary perspective, which is right over on the side here, scenario planning, to say what are multiple scenarios, through to how does strategy and insights build into that. We can share that map with you along with a guide that steps you through things, and also a copy of this presentation so you can take a look through. Now, if you'd like to get those things, just head across to that address there. So you can kind of select what things you want there and just tick those and we'll get it sent across to you. But I've actually managed to finish 10 minutes ahead of time. Now, this is your time to use. So you might be going, awesome, I've got stuff I need to roll into already. I want to apply some of these techniques. Or you might go, actually, I'd like to have a bit of a conversation with others around how some of these things might work or might be applied. So over to you now as a group. If you have to head off, thanks very much for spending time this morning with us. But if you want to join the conversation, we're now going to stop the recording